So, welcome to the library at midnight. Well, I started this group of texts by reading Mueller's piece, and I was actually at the beginning quite confused about what I felt is I had almost arrived to a conversation that had already started without me. I didn't quite understand, for example, what she meant by what group of theories she was understanding as the post-process theories. And quote that caught my attention was this, and from page 52, unlike the elite students drilled in rhetorical methods to communicate an already realized ethos, contemporary recipients of the lessons of composition are thus left with longing for power, not access to its symbolic habits. Probably what Mueller is referring to is that more critical approaches to composition, what they do is almost let go of the responsibility to teach writing and kind of dismiss the relevance of teaching norm and teaching academic standards of writing. So what happens is that students who already come with disabilities or with this kind of training adopt more easily the critical approaches, while students who don't come with this preparation will what they acquire are maybe critical ideas, but not really the tools for composing that will allow them to become empowered and to enter different disciplinary spheres or spheres of social power. And this is similar to what I see Bartholomae saying here when he says in page 341, students learn to be critical of their writing, to understand how and where they are implicated in questionable ways of speaking, long before they learn to change it. And so we see here is kind of a similar claim to what Mueller is saying, that critical theories almost dismiss the importance of teaching norm or teaching academic style and rhetorical abilities in general. But Bartholomee's approach is sort of interesting because how can we acquire the ability to criticize of our writing and to be critical about our writing and revise it without sort of a critical approach to what is wrong? And what seems to happen here, or at least for me, is I see a very easy sort of separation or distinction between content and form. What writing looks like when it's formally correct, and what writing looks like when its content is interesting. And what I have sometimes seen in students' writing, or what I have experienced also through conversations with disciplinary specialists, is that actually students have trouble writing when the content is difficult, to grasp. So most of the times, mechanics is not the problem, or style is not the primary problem, but rather rhetorical situations and dealing with very, very complex content. So I see this critique of all the critical approaches as problematic, because it's sort of it tends to fall on this separation and this saying that students learn to be critical of their writing before they learn to change it as a problem, while there is no other way in really to revise text. And there Bartholomae also um, proposes something interesting, which is, well, criticism is not taught as revision. It is taught as something else. And what he is referring to is probably, well, it's taught as critical theory and not as the ability to engage critically or to criticize our own style of writing. So with these two readings, what I thought of is, well, what is that we understand as education and composition? What is that we understand that defines the field of composition studies? And here, Mueller's approach is also interesting, because what he says is, well, in order to see what defines us, maybe we should look at what we read and what kinds of conversations we engage with. And actually what happens, or what he shows through the study of the long tail of composition studies, is that apparently there is not a lot of discussions and conversations. There are a few authors that are often mentioned once again and again, and a long list of authors that appear, scattered in different texts and citations, probably with different intentions. Some just to say, I mentioned this other scholar, but not really engage in a deep conversation that moves forward among a group of more or less stable authors. So then I found this question very interesting, that he asks, how flat can the citation distribution become before it is no longer plausible to speak of a discipline? So the way Mueller is understanding this is that the discipline is defined by certain conversations. And in that sense, I also found the abolitionist debate that is touched on by the other authors in the set of readings. This Kevin Brooks says, what is really at stake in the new abolitionist debate is an exchange of conceptual and tactical tools for improving learning and working conditions, and the debate seems most useful as a framework for asking what tactics are working in various institutions. How can these tactics or tools be exchanged? How do they get translated from one institution to another? What Brooks says is, yeah, I am defending abolitionists in a way, but I am defending it because this conversation is important. It is important that we actually question whether the work of teaching compositions is better done in general writing courses, or if it is done better in the different disciplines. But here there's always the question, and it is a question also for me right now, collaborating in the development of a WAC initiative. What is better? What exactly does a better composition look like when you take it across disciplines? And are we happy as educational institutions about this being defined differently in different departments and not having a common parameter? Related to this, Connor says that since the institutional beginning of the required composition course, the greatest number of abolition arguments have come from outsiders who despise the course as useless and mechanical, nearly always from what David Russell called romantics, people who did not believe that writing could be taught at all. The new abolitionism is the work of insiders, people trained as writing specialists from an early point in their careers, and it is based on exactly the opposite conclusion, that the development of writing abilities can be facilitated between different situational contexts. And this is the question that is behind WAC approaches and WAC initiatives, and it's something that I believe in too. Disciplinary communities have their own languages, and there are students, I would say all students, for whom these languages and these disciplinary ways of knowing and doing are not accessible unless they are communicated to them, they are explicitly taught to them. Otherwise, they're just the teachers, instead of communicators of the discipline, are mere gatekeepers. They know the secrets of how writing is done. As Crowley says, this transparent communication of what the norms is and what are the expectations from students writing in the different disciplinary spaces, which actually are very different, require different forms of communication, undermine the myth, or overcome the myth that there are general writing skills. The myth of the academic essay continues to nurture massive freshman English programs for reasons other than its salience to writing instruction. It fosters and supports the persistent American belief that universal standards of literacy exist, and it legitimizes and covers over the social and institutional functions of freshman English. And this is a conversation that we have had over the semester, that what is freshman composition, and what are we teaching when we teach freshman composition? Are we teaching this standard English that belongs to one specific social class or social group, or are we communicating the language of the university, of college? However, we know that the languages of college are all very different depending on where you are situated within these different disciplinary spaces. So, okay, this has already been very long. We'll continue the conversation in class.